why did we write this? Whose idea was this? Oh, Mike wrote this, or Emily wrote it, but Mike was the last guy to touch it, and maybe that's why it doesn't make any sense. Maybe we can look back at a previous version. So I don't think we ever
saw
want
that
to
one
lose
coming.
that. They really write themselves. I'm not even trying.
All right, welcome everybody. Let's get going. We got a fair amount to cover today, and I think this is one of those topics where the folks on the other end of the call, the non-Simpraxians, you may do this every day. So there are some best practices out here that we've identified, or better practices. There are probably some that you'll identify too. So feel free to use the chat as we go, or just come off of mute if you have questions or to talk about particular points of emphasis. We're going to talk today about offboarding. When people leave the organization, stuff happens. Let's figure out how to minimize the impact of that. Julie is in fact here in the office.
I drove like a bat out of heck.
Yeah.
No state or federal laws were broken, though.
Right.
No.
And it's a nice smile you've got there.
Yes.
So the three big topics, right? Offboarding, doing it properly starts with onboarding properly. We'll talk about what to do about user accounts when people leave the organization and other things after users leave. That's our kind of high level shape of the conversation. So I know we talked about this in our prep. To say, this is Todd. Todd, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So one of the things, so again, the whole idea of this, to take care of this before we offboard, one of the things that we can do, and something that Emily and I've been doing a bunch with customers, is taking advantage of dynamic groups. So this is a group whose membership is based on some attribute of a user, not individual users themselves. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. But one of the advantages to that is when you have people in these groups and you do it by attribute, then you don't have to worry about removing them from the groups, because as you remove these attributes, they go away. And then one of the things that you can do is you can set the dynamic group, the rules, and you can say, like, if a department is accounting and if location is Iowa, then they're in this group. But then you can always add to those rules if account enabled equals active. So we're going to talk later about what to do when somebody leaves, but one of the things we're going to have you do is deactivate their account as opposed to deleting it. And as soon as you deactivate their account, they no longer match the rules for that group, and they're automatically taken out. So you don't have to worry about going down later and taking them out. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but where it shows up is with Microsoft 365 groups. Those can be used for access control, for SharePoint, things like that, but they also can be used for email. So if somebody weren't getting automatically taken out, then when they would go up and somebody would send an email to that group, if they would hover over it, these people who have left the company, their names would show up, or if they expanded, those names would show up, and that can be a little disconcerting. So if you do use dynamic groups, then throw that whole and account active equals true to make sure they get pulled out.
All right, so there's some HR aspects to offboarding, some IT aspects to offboarding, probably other ones. Where should we write them down and make them visible to people? Oh, sorry, forgot the build. Still on this one. Go to the next slide.
I was like, that's a weird transition to M365 groups.
I was not following that either.
Yep. So another thing that I see happen really commonly is there's usually the designated person who's the owner of the meeting, who's leading it, who's taking notes, etc. And more often than not, they're also the owner of the calendar invite. Now, if I'm the owner of the team meeting at Simpraxis every single Friday and I leave Simpraxis, that meeting calendar event is also tied to my account. So instead of building all of these recurring series based off of a personal account, do it off of those M365 group calendars that you have. So that way, as the people change in that M365 group, those events stay the same.
Let's talk about our favorite topic.
I could say this out loud because I'm not a huge fan. Essentially, we're just saying when you're building Power Platform things like Power Apps, Power Flows, Power Automate flows, you want to, if you can build that certainly in the context of your user account, but once you get to a point where you're like, okay, this is ready to launch and be in a production type of role, then you want to definitely change it so that there's a group of owners, and or maybe even better practice, if you can accommodate it in your organization, is to create a service account for that particular Power Platform flows or app, so that you don't have to worry about the user leaving and thereby having to, juggle who's owning it and how to fix that thing after the fact.
Yeah, another part of the flow one is if your flows are using connections, make sure the connection is not using the connection for the person who's leaving. So that's separate from the owner of the flow itself.
Yeah, that's the big impetus for using a service account, is that all the connections to SharePoint, to the graph, to email, inbox, those are all based on the user that the connection is attached to. So if you remove someone's access to SharePoint, that flow will no longer have access.
So on the off chance you want to build something without professionally developed scalability, security, portability, etc., you've trained me well. And licensing.
This is another one. So I originally delivered this a few years ago, and one of the things that I wanted to keep in mind for people is if you don't delete the group or delete the user and just deactivate them, they probably have a license associated with them, like an E5, E3, whatever. So you have to remember to pull that license off and all that. But one of the things that's come out in M365 in the last couple of years is the ability to license by group. So you can apply a license to a group, and then anybody who is in that group has that license. So if you do your licensing that way, then when the person is removed from the group, you don't have to worry about chasing that license down. So consider switching over to licensing by group if you're not doing that already.
We did that with Viva Topics pilot for one of our clients, and it worked great. Actually, just slotting people in and out and lighting it up for them.
Yeah.
Any with respect to what's in the comments, Chris did a great point about forms, and orphaned forms and orphaned form response information, some of which I know we've talked about before. Any thoughts on Mike Dixon's note about assigning ownership to a team?
Yeah, I just responded to that.
Oh, cool.
But maybe, Derek, do you have anything to add to what I said, which is essentially great practice when service accounts don't make sense or can't be? Anything else that I missed?
No, I wouldn't, although I do have something to add to Krista's comment about forms. From a governance perspective, I would say that's a really good reason to make sure that all of your form data is backed up and stored into SharePoint, and you can use a Power Automate Cloudflow to synchronize all of that.
Oh, good point. That's excellent.
Because the data lives in the form or with the form, and getting that out is a humongous pain.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up, Emily, but yeah.
I have not forgotten. I've been burned by that. I will never not back up my form data again.
I was totally thinking the same thing, and I'm like, let's not bring up that traumatic experience again.
You try to send out free stickers once in your life, trying to do a good thing. You delete your form data. It's traumatizing.
That's what Asks and Praxis is for, right? Yeah. It's too late. It's too late for me. Save yourself, right?
Exactly.
Share our scars.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about how we document our offboarding.
So I think one thing that's important to think about is that offboarding crosses a lot of different departments, and they each have a different piece. It's really important to increase the transparency of what that process is in your organization, of course, as much as you can. Offboarding isn't always termination. Sometimes someone is leaving for great reasons. They did a great job documenting things before they go. And if someone's choosing to leave a company, it's really helpful for them to have a preview of what the process is going to be as well, because it might inform their decision and timing of communication. So just a reminder, since we're always talking about our love for learning pathways, it supports this idea that you could have one site page per site where the authors are who own that piece of the process, but then you can compile it all together in one playlist. But the best part is using that Learning Pathways web part to put that playlist in context on another site. In this example, it's likely human resources who's going to talk about offboarding.
I love this.
So like a use case, a pretty common use case, Emily, or at least a common pattern of dropping that cross-functional content into the context of the activity that we're talking about. I don't care who owns these aspects of it, but I know where I'm going to go. So I can go to one place and learn about it across functions.
Absolutely. And I would say that you could do this with Viva Learning, but you can't yet. They did announce it's coming though. So in the future, hopefully we'll have a slide that includes that as well.
So by way of segue here, is this a place where we would document and communicate to people whether or not we maintain user accounts when people leave the organization? Okay.
Yeah,
Why
that
would
would
I?
probably
Yeah.
that would probably be a part of what IT was maintaining in that picture, right?
Yep. Yep.
Whether or not human resources doesn't necessarily have to have an opinion on that. You want each department to kick in the part of the thinking that matters based on their skill.
Yep. So this is one I think is a question of doctrine, Todd, right? Some people want to do X, some people want to do Y.
Yeah, so this is kind of the big motivator for this is what to do with the user account when somebody leaves, and it kind of like all of this discussion is built around that. This whole deck is built around this slide, and it is our opinion that in most cases it makes sense to not delete users, at least not right away when they leave, but instead to disable them. And we're going to talk about what that process looks like in the next couple of slides. But here are the reasons that we came to that. And it really all comes around us being, IT folks and all that, and trying to do a little bit of CYA. And so the pros are there listed. I'm not going to go through all of them, but really what it does is it makes it easier to go back in time if you need to, log in as the person, see what they've done. If they come back, so Emily mentioned that sometimes people leave for great reasons and then come back. If so, you can just re-enable the account as opposed to trying to recreate it. And even if you've got your onboarding automated and recreating things is not a big deal. If you do, the SIDs and the object IDs are all going to be different, so then you have to re-permission them and all that. Whereas if you don't delete them, if you just deactivate them and kind of hide them, although that stuff stays the same. It protects you against login or email reuse. So it keeps, if Mike leaves the company and we delete him, then if we hire another Mike Gilronan later, he might end up with the same email address and somebody might be sending the new Mike email that they meant for the old Mike. And there's things like that. So there's a lot of reasons to keep those accounts around, at least, again, for the short term. Some of the cons that we've run into with customer or with clients when we've done this is depending on how you're accessing it, sometimes those phantom users can show up like in SharePoint people search, things like that. So you got to take some extra steps with that. It's potentially an increased attack vector because there is an additional account that it can be attacked, but I've honestly not seen if you deactivate it and take the license away and all that, I'm not sure how anybody could really exploit that, but I did want to call it out. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, while I do believe this is primarily an IT decision, an IT function, you may have compliance reasons that require you to delete it. Maybe your country has a law about that, so it might be an HR thing, or maybe your security folks are really adamant about something. So certainly communicate it with them. But it's our our thought that you should be deactivating them instead of deleting them.
Another thing that we've seen some people do, and I'm curious what the rest of you think, is change the user's name somehow, like say X at the front of X Mike Gilronan, for example. The user's still there, but then they've got this sort of strange different name. Any thoughts on whether that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I like it. I see where you're going. I think it's probably weird and jarring to any normal folks, non-IT folks that would stumble across that during the day. However, it would show up in SharePoint search or something, because one of the things that'll happen is you put like ZZ in front of it, so they sort to the bottom, things like that, and then it just looks weird to anybody. Maybe at the end put gone. I don't know. It would be. It would be tough to make that surface.
I've seen that ZZZ thing in many enough tenants that at least I know what it is, but it still feels weird. It feels like it shouldn't really be there.
Yeah, I don't love that either.
It would be nice if when you disable an account, it pulls it out of things like search and that in a lot of ways that should be sort of the way the platform works.
I was going to
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah, it really is that we're having to do a lot of things that the system should do by itself. Steve commented on another no oh my god today, no automatic OneDrive reassignment and notification. Holy cow, what am I doing today? Anyway, so that's another con.
The OneDrive thing we're going to talk about a little bit in the later thing. The other thing to keep in mind is the things that we're talking about. We're all SharePoint folks, obviously, but this technique impacts a bunch of different products: Azure, Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, and all of those products came from different other products, so they all handled this differently. Exchange or SharePoint specifically, when you delete a user in SharePoint, some things kick off. User removal things happen. They're not good or bad, but they're not always what people expect. So the OneDrive thing, you can lose OneDrives if you delete accounts and don't understand the process that goes through. So yes, keep asking the questions about OneDrive and all that is good, because some of those processes are a little opaque.
Mark has a comment about adding the user description when the account was disabled. That's, that's a way to not change the title, but have something pretty highly visible that tells that user has left.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is when a user is disabled, and you look at their people card, some of the links are still there, like chat with this person or email this person, but they actually don't do anything. They actually have, it's, in essence, they error out because the values that need to go into that action aren't correct anymore. So again, it's a system thing that sort of keeps them around in a weird way, as opposed to, I think that's why some of the strange workarounds, the ZZZs, the X, whatever, to try to sort of separate the people who've left happen.
Julie, is there anything in the comments that you want to field in line, or do you want to just jump to the next where I think we're going to cover some of this?
No, we're good.
Okay. Let's talk about some prescriptive guidance when people leave.
So this is kind of the process itself. So this is, all the things that we talked about. If you want to keep the account but not delete it, here's kind of the steps of it. First thing, if somebody, if Mike decided he was going to go off, he won the lottery and was going to go move to Belize or something, first thing we would do is disable the account as opposed to delete it, of course, and scramble the password, reset the password. So if somehow the account does happen to get re-enabled through some workflow or something that Mike or whatever things Mike had logging in that couldn't get back in. Another option that you have when somebody leaves is to wipe any devices where they were signed in. So, if they've got and be careful with this one, of course, because if somebody's got a home phone that they'd been using with, Outlook, there's a potential to wipe that, but wiping any company data off of their devices. And then if you haven't done licensing by group, then remove their licenses. And you have the option of just removing the license and keeping it in a pool to assign to somebody else. Or you can, not quit paying for the license. So kind of have an idea about that. But that's kind of the steps overall. Now we're going to talk about some platform specific steps like SharePoint and all that. Oh yeah, there we go. So for email, we have a few options. One of the things that we can do is we can take their inbox and convert it to a shared mailbox if we don't want to lose what was in it. And then you can give other people permission to it, things like that. You can set up an auto reply that says, hey, Mike's not here anymore. Email Derek instead. You can have the email forward to somebody else, things like that. You could export it out as a PST, but I only brought that up so I could make fun of people that export it to a PST, because those are terrible and nobody ever uses them. And
Todd, is there an e-discovery vector there though, like to snapshot something at a point in time and memorialize it?
It's a good question. I haven't played with e-discovery a bunch, but that feels like something that it would do. Yeah,
feels like a use case maybe there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Legal holds
I think it's fair to say that depending on your industry and your corporate regulations and all sorts of stuff, your governance, any one of these things might not be the right thing for your particular organization, but these added together make better practices.
the patterns that we see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody's favorite. We're killing it today.
Yep, we've talked about this. Find out which Power Automate flows they own and share those with another user so that somebody else can get in and look at them. That's a really clunky interface. The last time I did that, you can't really change the owner, but you can share it, and then it doesn't show up as your flows anymore. It is ugly and clumsy and stupid from start to finish.
Rob brought that up in the chat, and Shane shared a link about it. So yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yep.
And then again, the credentials if you're not using service accounts, all that.
Thanks, Steve, about the e-discovery piece. Do we want Todd to confirm that question about mail forwarding?
No, that was just a little sub
Okay.
question that I thought of.
And SharePoint.
Yeah, so this one, one of and I thought we had it on an earlier slide, but one of the things that you can do to prepare yourself for this is make sure that sites always have at least 2 owners. And there are things you can do, like when groups are created, you can make that a rule that a group can't be created without having a secondary owner, all those kind of things. So you can help yourself with that. But when you do that, then when somebody leaves, you need to replace them in that group of 2 owners. So no matter what you're doing, when somebody leaves, you need to find the sites where they're an owner and either remove them or and add somebody to be the backup, or if you're going to delete the account, put somebody in that stead so you don't get stuck with nobody having access to it. There you can find the primary owner. There's no great way to do this. So earlier in the chat, somebody asked if there was a way to find out where people are owners. There's no good way out of the box. Of course, you could click and drill into every one of them. If it were me, I would run a PowerShell script that would do it. I probably have one laying around that does it. But there also are a lot of great tools. There you go. They will give you ShareGate, SysKit, those kind of tools. So that would give you that information as to where they were known or not. And then their OneDrive is the other thing. So this is part of that whole process. And I don't remember all the steps off the top of my head, but if you don't delete the user, but remove the license for the user, I think their OneDrive sticks around. But regardless, you're going to want to give somebody else access to it. And if there's valuable stuff in there, you're going to want to move it to some place. If it's valuable, it shouldn't be in someone's OneDrive anyway. So this is a good time to look at that and move it to some central location.
Anything else about finding teams, sites and teams where the person is an owner? I thought, Emily, the thing you called out the other day where for communication sites, you can do it right in the admin.
Oh, that's actually Derek. He taught me something new. So
right.
It's only for your primary owner, but yeah, you can do it in the admin center and filter to it, which is pretty cool. But it's only primary owner. So if they're one of the other owners, it's not necessarily going to come there. So my personal preference, as someone who focuses on out of the box, I like the audit log and I like ShareGate.
Yeah. Yep. And the audit log only audits when somebody is added as the owner, correct? So you have to filter for that event. I forget our discussion on that.
Right, and you only have 90 days of history there by default. So it's a useful spot to look, but it's not necessarily going to solve all your problems.
I know of people who write tools to export the audit log into SQL so they can get to more history. But yes.
Right.
All right, let's talk about some of the content implications, people believe.
So this is one, and this is a discussion I've had with clients, for 20 years, even for on-prem SharePoint, is people have this idea that when somebody leaves the company, you want to scrub their existence completely. And I've always thought that was a really bad idea. And part of the reason is this, and I think this is a good thing. So when somebody leaves, any documents that they touch in SharePoint will continue to have their created by and modified, even if we delete them, disable them, whatever. And there are ways to change that, but I think it's a bad idea because I think it's very valuable to be able to look back in 5 years and say, this document that talks about this process, why did we write this? Whose idea was this? Oh, Mike wrote this, or Emily wrote it, but Mike was the last guy to touch it, and maybe that's why it doesn't make any sense. Maybe we can look back at a previous version. So I don't think we ever want to lose that. They really write themselves. I'm not even trying. So be resistant to any ideas of trying to remove, like I wouldn't want this to show as Mike as the creator. Yeah, it's fine. leave it there. That's important information.
We want to talk about this one.
Yeah, was this mine?
I probably
Thanks,
wrote
Mark.
that.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think that, if you were to try to reassign ownership of content, which you can do with a tool like ShareGate, for example, you can change the created by and modified by, then you've lost that connection that Todd was talking about. So, I've seen people go to great lengths to try to do that. And, in some cases it may make sense. Like, okay, that person is gone and now this new person actually needs to have ownership of this thing because a flow is going to alert them because they're the created by, for example. Well, in that case, maybe a process would dictate that you would change the person's name, but then you lose that sort of historical connection. So I think it's just important to understand the ramifications of that effort that Todd's talking about. Let's scrub everybody from existence, which really doesn't make a lot of sense from a content perspective. And that's the other bullet that I wrote there. So those two are connected, I think.
One question comes to mind because of some recent experience. Does anything in here relate to a person changing their name? So they stay part of the organization, but they change their name.
Shouldn't.
That is a different ball of wax. So I think outside of SharePoint, everything will pick that up when it's changed in the home of record. So Azure AD.
And unless you do what I've seen at least one client do, which is create a new user and disable the old one. That's not how you do it.
Don't do that.
Okay, some worst practices. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That one, we should have seen that one at the holiday party when we talked about. So yeah, I think everything will just pick that up. SharePoint can be a little dumb about that, again, because of its history of being an on-prem product and its history of being two different on-prem products with two different places to store user information. So that might take, well, I'm thinking about like the WSS user info table and then the MOS user profile service. And so that might take some massaging. I think that would all cycle through, but we'd have to check that.
Okay. Just as we put up this resources slide, some stuff that we've come across and prep for this, etc. Did want to open it up to the group as well. There's people out there providing a lot of good commentary in the chat, and there's people out there who do this every day. You're a SharePoint administrator for a large organization. Anything else that you would want to underscore that we didn't cover here that you'd want to make sure people should know?
Oh, we covered the whole thing.
We did.
That's it.
All right.
That.
I do want to say that top link up there has a bunch of great stuff in it. Some of the stuff that we talked about came from there. They obviously, from the title, remove a former employee, they advocate removing as opposed to just deactivating and all that. But a bunch of it is a whole lot of those other little nooks and crannies that we talked about. So that's a really good one.
Yes,
all right,
the links are clickable. Love that.
Yeah.
Accessibility for the
that's
win.
That's how you can tell that Ruth's actually taking this seriously and paying attention. She tried to click on something and found out it worked.
Yeah,
all right, so as we approach, yep. Sorry, Julie.
No, that's okay. Go.
So we approach the top of the hour. 2 weeks from today, we're gonna deep dive into something we've been spending a lot of time and calories on lately. Emily's going to guide us through some best practices around user research and testing. So how to conduct that research, how to go about it, what the outcomes should be, etc. So working alongside her on some of this stuff, I'm excited, and this is a great topic, one we're super keen on. We're a month out from ESPC, just about a month out from that for those of you going to Copenhagen. And Julie, anything new with Cloud Dev Clarity that we should tell folks about?
Not since the last time we did drop our React hooks versus components episode, and we have in the works another episode, but I'm not going to tease it here. You should definitely join the Discord server, the Voitanis Discord server, and there is a whole area dedicated to Cloud Dev Clarity where you can join the chat and listen to us record the sessions live, which can get interesting. And so, yeah, absolutely should do that.
I wanted to throw one thing in that I forgot to mention earlier that Mark Chrisman reminded me of. The documentation bit is it comes as a surprise to no one. I automate a bunch of these things, and if you're automating any of this, that is a good start at documentation. And if you've got any of this documented, that is a great start at automating it. So those two things go hand in hand. So yes, document all the things, and then consider automating as many things as makes sense.
And review those approaches on a semi-annual basis or something. Don't just assume that it's always going to be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Change.
All right, folks, right on time. Thank you, everybody, for all the prep, for all of the feedback and chat. A lot of good dialogue this week. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Stay safe and go Phillies.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Some Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues. Join us again as we release new content every other Wednesday.